Welcome to the Wisconsin Humane Society's Guide to Modifying Barrier Reactivity. We refer to a dog as being barrier reactive when they bark, growl, or rush forward in response to a stimulus when they are behind a barrier. The trigger for this behavior might be another dog, cat, person, or squirrel. Modifying this behavior is possible, but requires a high level of consistency. There are a few supplies that you will need to modify this behavior. Be sure to have high-value treats for your training sessions, such as tiny cut-up pieces of hot dogs or string cheese. You will also need a way to block your windows and fence lines so that your dog cannot see out of them unless you are actively training with them. Be sure to have a comfortable leash and flat collar for your dog to wear during your training sessions. You'll also need long-term chews, such as filled Kongs or bully sticks, for your dog to have throughout the day and immediately after their training sessions. Many families find it helpful to have a white noise machine, a radio, or a TV running throughout the day to dampen the sounds of people and dogs passing outside. You may also find it helpful to have treat jars strategically placed throughout your home so that treats are readily at hand in case you need them to support your dog. Your first step will be to create a management plan. It is important to have a management plan in place before you attempt to modify this behavior. You will need to cover windows and fence lines to ensure that your dog is unable to practice reacting at triggers while behind these barriers. You can block your dog from seeing outside of your windows by keeping your curtains and blinds drawn. You can also purchase cling window covers that let light through but do not allow your dog to clearly see people, dogs, or other triggers outside of the window. You can also cover your windows without having to purchase any additional supplies. You can see in this picture, a sheet is taped up on the window to prevent the dog from seeing outside. You can achieve the same effect with large pieces of cardboard and duct tape. For covering fence lines, you can purchase commercial covers for chain link fences. You can also purchase large plastic tarps and zip tie them to your fence line to prevent your dog from seeing through them. We would also recommend that your dog drag a leash or long line so that if they do become reactive, you can safely and quickly redirect them. Remember, you should never attempt to grab the collar of a dog that is reacting or pick them up. In this video, you can see the cling window covers that allow light through but do not allow the dog in the video to see what is happening outside of the windows. You can also see that the curtain on the front door is drawn, again, so that the dog cannot see what's happening outside. When given access to this room, he's also given a long-term chew, a bully stick, so that he is busy doing something other than focusing on the sounds that are happening outside of the home and barking at them. Once your management plan is in place, you can begin to work towards modifying this behavior. Be sure that your dog only has access to the barriers that they typically react at triggers through when you are there to support them. Before you begin your training session, you'll want to be sure to cut up high-value training treats like cheese, sausage, or hot dogs. Cut up more than you think that you'll need. It will be very important during these sessions to not run out of your reinforcer. If you have leftover reinforcers, you can use them for a future training session. Before you begin your training session, you'll also need to be sure to fit your dog with a comfortable collar or harness attached to a leash. If your dog does become reactive, you will not be able to grab their collar or pick them up, so this will be a helpful management tool. Now that you have all of your necessary supplies, you can move forward with your training session.
Yeah, good boy. Yes. Good boy.
In this video, you can see that I approach the training session with Griffin, my Chihuahua, on leash and treats ready to go in my hand. The moment that he notices something outside of the window, I begin to feed him. I do turn his head slightly each time I feed him to give him a chance to take a break from staring at his triggers outside of the window. When Griffin is unable to eat food, I calmly encourage him to move further away from his trigger and offer him food again. When moved further away, he did begin to eat, but if he had not, I would have exited the room with him and ended the training session. If your dog begins to bark and react, or is unable to take food, don't panic. That simply means that your dog is over their threshold. Your dog's threshold will be the distance at which they will no longer take food or begin to bark and react at the trigger. If your dog is over threshold, you will be unable to modify their behavior in that moment. If this occurs, move further away, as I did with Griffin in the previous video. Once you're further away, you can reassess the situation. If your dog is able to eat, you can continue working. If they are unable to eat, you will need to exit the training session and try again later from a further distance. When you begin your training journey, we would recommend starting off your training sessions as far away from the barrier as you possibly can to minimize the likelihood of your dog going over threshold. As your dog is successful, you can steadily move closer to the barrier with each subsequent training session. The next important component of your behavior modification plan will be record keeping. After each session, write down the length of the session, the reinforcers that you used, how far away you were from your trigger, and how successful your dog was. This will allow you to see regular trends. Is your dog consistently struggling at a certain distance? If so, you will need to be sure that you start off further away, likely with a higher value reinforcer the next time around. After the training session that you saw in the previous slide, I would have made a note for myself to start further away with Griffin, because he struggled to be so close to the window. In the future, I would start on the furthest cushion of the couch so that there was more distance between Griffin and his trigger. Eventually, I could work back up to being right next to the window. Remember, as we mentioned previously, this is hard work for your dog. Keep your sessions short and praise your dog heavily for their successes. After a training session, it can be incredibly beneficial to offer your dog a long-term chew, such as a Kong or bully stick, to give them the opportunity to decompress. Be patient and consistent, as modifying this behavior takes time and a high level of structure. If you are struggling with this behavior, you can reach out to the Wisconsin Humane Society's behavior line at 414-431-6173. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Happy training.